Welcome to a video where we will learn how to graph systems of inequalities using the TI-84 graphing calculator. In this video, I will be demonstrating how to do this using the TI-84 Plus CE. If you have an older version of the TI-84 graphing calculator, some of the menus might be slightly different than what you see on the screen, and I'll try to verbally note how things will be different. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is add the Inequalz application. This is located in the Apps button on your calculator. So we'll start by pressing Apps, and then we'll scroll down to the Inequalz program and hit Enter twice. Note the Inequalz program is not available for older versions of the TI-84 calculator, so you can just skip this step if the program's not available to you. Let me show you how to add this to your calculator. Press the Apps button and then scroll down until you see Inequalz. For me, that is option 7. So I'll press the number 7. And you see that I'm getting an error message. It says conflicting apps. I can either quit the inequality graphing application or quit the apps listed below. So since I want to add the inequality graphing application, I'm going to press 2 to quit the program that I had. If you see this screen, just go ahead and press any key. So I'll just hit Enter again. And this will either take you back to the home screen or the Y equals screen. Here are the directions to graphing a system of inequalities on the TI-84 calculator. After we go through this, we'll look at a few examples. The first thing that you need to do is isolate Y to one side if necessary. Many problems, the Y is already isolated to one side, but if it's not, you'll need to start by solving for Y if you're using the TI-84 calculator. When you're ready to enter the inequality into the graphing menu, you'll press the Y equals button. To the left of the Y equals button, you'll select the type of inequality, or for older versions, you'll select the type of shading. So if you have a greater than or equal to inequality, you want to select the shading that is above the line. It looks like this picture here where the black triangle is on top of the line. If you have less than or equal to, you want to select the image of the below the line shading. It looks like a black triangle below the line. Once you've selected your shading, to the right of the Y equals, you'll enter the rest of the inequality. Once you graph the shaded area, the solution is the overlapping shaded regions. Keep in mind that the solution must satisfy all of the inequalities. That means that when there are 3 or more inequalities, the solution must overlap 3 or more times. If you had 4 inequalities, you would have to look into the shaded region where all 4 shaded areas overlap. And some systems just do not have a solution. So if the shaded areas do not overlap, you may not have a solution. Or if you have 3 inequalities and only 2 of the shaded areas overlap, that system would not have a solution. Let's look at some examples. The first example that we're going to look at, we're going to graph the solution to the system of inequalities. Y is greater than or equal to 5x plus 4, and y is greater than negative 5/4 x plus 2. Let's go over to our graphing calculator. To locate the graphing menu, press the Y equals button. If you have any equations typed in, you can just arrow down and hit clear to clear those equations. Make sure you're working with a blank slate. Let's select the type of inequality. To do this, arrow over until the Y equals and the line are flashing. Now, if you have an older version, you will just repeatedly hit Enter until you cycle through and see the correct shading image. On the CE, when I hit Enter, this menu will come up. and I can select the type of inequality by using the right and left arrow keys. So for our first inequality, we had greater than or equal to. And you can see that this is going to be paired with a solid line where the shading is above the line for greater than or equal to. If you had an older calculator, you would just keep hitting enter until you see this style image. Arrow down and then hit enter to say OK. Arrow back to the right and enter the rest of the inequality. So that first inequality was y is greater than or equal to 5x plus 4. And now we'll do the same for the next inequality. So arrow to the left until the image is flashing. Press enter to cycle through for older calculators. I'm going to use the left and right arrow keys to select the correct inequality. So our second inequality was strictly greater than, and you can see this one is going to be paired with a dashed line where the shading is above for greater than. Press enter to say OK. Arrow back to the right and enter the rest of the inequality. So that was negative 5/4 x plus 2. Now the best way to view the graph is to go to the zoom menu and then select option 6, which is zoom standard. That will take you to the traditional 10 by 10 graphing window. And now you can see the first inequality, which was graphed in blue with vertical shading lines. We have that solid line were shaded above the line. The second inequality has a dashed line and these horizontal red shading lines. The two lines intersect and there are 4 regions of shading, but there is only one where they both overlap. So our solution set is this triangle in the upper portion of the graph. So we graphed our system of inequalities on our TI-84 calculator, and the solution is that shaded area toward the upper portion of the graph. Here's another version of that graph that I drew in Desmos, and this would be how we would show our final answer. We have the solid green line for the first inequality. It's a solid line because greater than or equal to, and the dashed line for the second inequality because of the strictly greater than, and our shaded area where we had the overlap was that upper triangle area, which I've shaded in gray here. Let's take a look at example number 2. We want to graph the solution to the system of inequalities. X is less than 7, y is greater than or equal to negative 4, and y is greater than or equal to negative 2x minus 8. Let's go back to our calculator and insert these inequalities. Let's go back to the graphing menu by pressing on the y equals button. I'll start by clearing out my inequalities. So just arrow over to each equation, hit clear. Now we have a blank slate. Now our first inequality was actually x is less than 7. We can't enter x is less than 7 in this window because these are all defined in terms of y. But in the upper left corner, you should see x equals. That menu will allow us to enter an equation or an inequality that's defined for x. If you were not able to add the inequality graphing application, you will not see x equals in the upper left corner, and therefore you will not be able to enter the x is less than 7. So what you'll have to do is you'll just have to add that inequality and that shading area to your paper when you write it down. You'll have to do that part by hand, essentially. So let's arrow up until the x equals is flashing, press enter, and now in this menu we can enter equations and inequalities that are defined for x. So if we want to enter an inequality, arrow over to the left, just as we did, hit enter. I'm actually going to change the color of this first one to green, since we already have one defined for blue and red. And we want x is less than, so I'm going to change my inequality to less than. You'll see that that's a dashed line with the shading below. And now press enter. And now enter the rest of the inequality by arrowing back to the right. And so we want x is less than 7. Okay, let's go back to the y equals menu so I can enter the second and third inequality. Now, you'll notice in the upper left, now the x equals menu is highlighted. That means that there is something entered into my graphing menu for x. So in the future, if I want to solve a different problem that doesn't have an inequality like x is less than 7, I need to go back up and clear that out before I proceed. Okay, let's enter the second inequality. So we want y is greater than or equal to, so we already have it on greater than or equal to. I don't need to change that. We want y is greater than or equal to -4 for our second inequality. And our third inequality was y is greater than or equal to, so I need to change inequalities here. Now we're at greater than or equal to, so we've got a solid line with the shading above. Press enter. Go back to the right and enter the rest of the inequality, -2x minus 8. Okay, so all of our inequalities are now entered into the graphing menu. We want to view the graph, so go back up to the zoom menu. Choose option 6, zoom standard. And now we see our shaded area with 3 inequalities. As you can see from the screen here, the shading area gets pretty muddy once we start having 3 and 4 inequalities. So we've got the first inequality, which was x is less than 7. That's in green with diagonal green shading lines. Then we had y is greater than or equal to -4. That was this horizontal blue line with the blue vertical shading. And then we had y is greater than -2x minus 8. That's this diagonal red line with the shading of horizontal red lines. So on the screen, you're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas, and they're all shaded. But the solution of the system is where all of the shaded areas overlap. And that looks like the second area is one where the green, the red, and the blue all overlap. So that is our solution. We solved our second example and we found that the solution is that second area in the upper portion of the graph where all 3 of the shaded regions overlap. Let me show you this same graph, but this is one that I drew in Desmos, and this is considered the solution. We've got our dashed vertical line at x is 7, our solid horizontal line at y is -4, and then the diagonal blue line where y is -2x minus 8. And the shaded area is just that region in the middle. So if you were drawing this as your answer, you would only be shading that portion in the middle part. For our third example, we're going to graph the solution to the system of inequalities 2x plus 3y is greater than or equal to 12, and 4x plus 6y is less than -12. Now, before we can enter these on our graphing calculator, we have to first isolate y for both of these inequalities. So let's do that first. Let's take the first inequality, 2x plus 3y greater than or equal to 12. We need to subtract 2x to both sides. this gives us 3y greater than or equal to negative 2x plus 12. And then we'll divide everything by 3. And we'll end up with y is greater than or equal to negative 2/3 x plus 4. Now let's look at the second inequality, 4x plus 6y less than negative 12. We need to start by subtracting 4x to both sides. This leaves us with 6y less than negative 4x minus 12. Divide everything by 6, and we're left with y is less than negative 2/3 x minus 2. You might notice that both of these lines have the same slope, negative 2/3. These lines will be parallel when we graph them on the calculator. Let's go over there now. Let's go back to the graphing menu by pressing the y equals button. The first thing I want to do is clear out all of the inequalities from the previous problem. And to start, we need to clear out the x equals. So arrow up to x equals and clear out the x is less than 7. You don't need to worry about changing the inequality sign. You just need to make sure you clear out the 7 part. Go back to y equals and clear out both of these inequalities. And now we can enter our new inequalities in. The first one was y is greater than or equal to negative 2/3 x plus 4. So we already have greater than or equal to, so I don't need to fix the inequality or the shading, so I can just type in negative 2/3 x plus 4. And the second one was y is less than negative 2/3 x minus 2. So we do need to adjust the inequality or the shading here. So arrow over to the left, select the less than inequality, or if you are using a calculator that doesn't have the Inequalz app, just select the picture with the shading below the line. Press enter. Arrow over to the right and enter the rest of the inequality. So negative 2/3 x minus 2. And now let's view the graph by clicking on the zoom button and then choosing option 6. And we see our graphs here. The first one is in blue with the vertical blue shading lines. The second one is the dashed line in red with the horizontal shading bars. Those two lines are parallel and they will never intersect. And because the first one is shaded above, the second one is shaded below, the shading areas are never going to overlap. Therefore, this system actually has no solution. So for our final answer on this problem, we would actually say that our system has no solution because the shading areas did not overlap. That means that there is no set of points that work for both inequalities at the same time. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching.